Welcome to the shop. I had an opportunity to buy one of these new Stanley number 4 smooth planes. Now, I thought it would be good to do a little comparison with some of the older ones. I didn't need the plane, obviously. I had 3 other number 4s. But the question in my mind was, how did this one stack up against the older ones? How well does it work? And what are some of the differences? So I want to get into that with you today. One of the main differences that I can start with to let you know is that all of these older ones are made in the United States of America. This one here is made in Mexico. That's neither here nor there as far as the political world is concerned. I don't really care too much about that right now. What I'm trying to do is just to notice whether or not the quality of the workmanship is as good as the older ones, how they feel, how it works, how good a finish it'll give you. Some years ago, a gentleman named Roger K. Smith, published a book on patented transitional and metallic planes in America. There's part 1 and a part 2. These are very good books, and if you're interested in collecting any planes, this is a very good book to have. You should definitely have it. But what he did was he decided to do a type study on Stanley planes. Now that type study was later published in John Walter's guidebook, but it is Roger Smith's original type study that's in here, and it's just published in the back of this book. And this also is a very good book to have if you plan on collecting any of these. Good for value and good for information. But his type study was all based on the Stanley number 4. And then from that type study, because we know certain changes were done in these planes in certain years, we know that Stanley would make that change across the board to all of their planes. So we oftentimes, on a number 5 or a number 6 or 8, most of those Bailey planes, we refer back to the type study to say, well, since this plane has a certain lever cap or a certain shape to the handle, whatever it is, then we know that that plane, even though it's not a number 4, was from that time period. The other thing about that type study is that because Stanley was a business, they would make certain changes to planes, and they wouldn't scrap their old ones. What they would do is they would make these modifications for a new season of putting out a plane, but they would use up their old parts. So oftentimes or not, you'll get a plane that doesn't seem to fit that type study just perfectly. And that's because maybe Stanley was reusing some of the older parts to get those out of the way before they started using the new parts. So they would do a major change, but they wouldn't necessarily just throw away a bunch of old parts. So keeping that in mind, we're going to refer to that type study as we go through here to figure out little information about some of these planes. So let me introduce you to the planes that we're going to use in our comparison today. This first number 4 is a type 6A. Now, the reason I say 6A is because, like I said, it goes between a type 6 and a 7. There's certain things on here that are unexplainable, but they don't quite fit an exact number 6, and we'll go into that. But the 6A, as I call it, is 1891 to 1892. So this plane was only made for that year or so, and then they went on with a different modification. So this is a type 6A. Then we jump ahead to a type 9. Now the type 9, this was 1892, so we're talking about quite a few years later, 8 or 9 years later. In 1902, they put out the type 9. Now, they didn't refer to it as a type 9. It was just another Stanley number 4. But it is a number 4, and there are some differences between them that we'll note. This was made between 1902 and 1907. So this plane had 5-year run, and then they came up with another change. Now, we're jumping further ahead, and this is a type 16. This is 1933 to 1941. You can already see distinctive differences in them just from your viewpoint, that this is taller than these others, and it says Stanley on the lever cap, and there's a keyhole shape on these, and here there's a kidney shape. We'll get into that. But so this was made from 1933 to 1941. Now, of course, things start to change because the war comes, and so there are even more changes. And they continued to change them all the way through, and I believe they stopped manufacturing and putting them out in 1984. But then Stanley had a resurgence and decided they were coming out with these newer planes, new box, different than the old boxes. And I'll look in the shop and see if I have an older box that these came in. But this is the common logo that you'll find now, for Stanley. As I said, it's made in Mexico, and here it is. This is the newer one. It's larger than those. I have to weigh it to see if it's heavier. The handle is modified. The adjusters are modified. It's a totally different plane, but it's still called a number 4 because it's put out by Stanley. They still have their sweetheart logo on it. We'll get a little deeper into it, but here are the three that we're going for. 1890s, 19th century, early 1900s, middle 1900s, 20th century, 2020, 21st century. 3 centuries of Stanley planes. This is the type study, and I don't know how many of you have seen this or not, but basically how this works is each type is described in the book, type 1, type 2, type 3, and we're going to go to type 6A, but I wanted to show you that the things that are mentioned in here are the type of the frog that's here, the base cutout inside the sole, whether it's this H pattern, the type of bolt that goes through inside the front knob, the shape of the tote or rear handle. The tote is a recent addition as far as the name is concerned. And this brass adjustment knob, which these describe, this would be a solid one with this patent on it. This would be a hollow one. No, this is a solid one also, but it's Bailey's. And then it'll describe, so it has a letter here, H, and you can go here to H, and you see that H appears in a type 2. These are the years, all these features of type 1 plus. And so what we're going to do is we're going to jump ahead in this over to 6A to see what they say about 6A. Stanley, 1891 to 1892, and it says all the features of type 6 except. So we can see that the new style lateral is now functioning in the new one. Here's the old one, had just a straight bend across here, but now the new one has this rotating disc on it, and Stanley spelled this way. Now that'll continue to change what is on this lever, because on the lateral lever there might be patent marks and things in here. So we're going to jump on to C6A, and so the handle would be the same as on 6, but here are the changes. A new trademark on the irons of the models, and a nib casting mark on the castings on the bed just behind the frog receiver. So we're going to take this apart and we'll take a look at some of those things. I've got the parts laid out, and we'll start with the iron because you don't really have to take the whole thing apart in order to examine the iron. First thing to check is this mark here, and you see it says Stanley patent. It says and then it says 92. So on the bottom here is L. Bailey's patent, December, I think it's 1867, December 24th, possibly. At any rate, this was on the cap iron and on the iron on the number 1. But so we're up to the 6A. So now we have this new patent mark here. And what's interesting is in the book, the patent mark Q says the patent date. Now on the body, the differences are on this one is that the NO for number is here and very closely together. Later ones, the 4 will be over here and the number will be over here. Now this is, while I still consider it a 6A, it really borders on the 6, and I'll show you why. This way they've done this nut here
is interesting. They probably a mistake. I don't know. I haven't seen a lot of them, but I have seen a few where the hole goes all the way through it. On the base for the frog, there's a curve here and a curve here, but there's no dot, no little dot here that they suggest on 6As that would have it. So I think that this is probably a number 6 with 6A additions to it. So it's a little earlier. It could be placed back probably to, let's see when that starts, would be 1888 to 1890. So the other thing about this is, on most of the planes, if you check this section here, you see how thin this line is. At certain points, it got thicker there, but these were tapered very thin, from fat down here and then thin, same thing all along that. So those are the things to look for when you're using the book. It's really neither here nor there what exact period this is from. On this one also, you'll see that it has a keyhole shaped opening here, and later they'll change it to a kidney shape. And there's no logo, there's no Stanley here. On these, you can look for little marks like this little bead or a B mark, and those will tell you things about when they were cast, which helps you tie all the different parts in together. Now, we were talking about the lateral lever here, and you see Stanley is there, but also these patent dates are added, and they are upside down. So it reads from PAT at the top, and then the dates down here below. What you look for is that little mark and the patent dates. And here you see that little disc that revolves. And on the back here, you'll notice also that there is no adjuster here that later planes would have to adjust the frog in and out, but this is predates that. And if you look on this, you can see the writing inside this piece here. See if I can get it to the beginning for you. But there you see all that writing inside there. So that dates when this was. So you use all that to put together what age you think the plane is. Let's put it back together, and we'll get on with testing them. I just put them in loosely at first just to make the connection. Then I'll sight down this line here to make sure I'm in the right position. So they're on, but they're loose. And then I'll look down in this direction to make sure I'm far enough back, because what I want is that to be flat across the front. That feels pretty good. So I'll tighten one down, and then I'll adjust a little bit. We'll tighten down the next one. Resight. There we go. And we'll tighten it down. Okay, that looks good. The opening looks nice and square. So now we'll put the iron in, and you can see how close the set of this is. Just a hair over it. And so we're going to put that in, rest it down, and get it into place. Use these two fingers to keep it square with the frog. Get the lever cap in place. And pull this down. And now we'll sight down the front of it and see how much the blade is sticking out. And it's just barely sticking out. So I'm going to make sure that I run this forward. And what's interesting on this early one is that the adjustment here is counterclockwise. When you turn it counterclockwise, it extends it. Later, they changed the thread on this so that when you turn it clockwise, you are advancing it. But right now, to pull it back, I'm turning it clockwise, and you can see it disappear into the sole there. Now, sometimes when you're sighting, what I'll do is I'll take it past what I want, and then I can see to make it parallel to the sole, and then I can change back into my forward and see how my shaving goes. So that's what we'll do right now. Well, I'll tell you what, for a first shot and that setup, that was pretty good about getting me a nice wide shaving. So that's nice. I'm not going to do anything else with it, but we'll still run a test on it, comparing it to the others. So here we are with Type 9, which is 1902 to 1907. In the book here begins the Type 9, Stanley 1902 to 1907, and they have a marking there that says major change. And that's because several things were changed on it, from the body and as well. The whole casting is different. So on 9, you have all the features of 8, except now the B casting marks are eliminated. The patent dates are eliminated from the lateral lever. Bailey's name is now cast on the toe, which is the front of the plane. A new style frog and a raised frog receiver with patent dates of 02 and August of 02 cast on the bed behind the frog. So now you have 2 patent dates on it, and you'll hear that referred to a lot. So here we have the number 4, Type 9, 1902 to 1907. And we can see that there aren't a lot of changes, except that on the book it says that it's a major change from that period. So we'll see what the changes are, but we can see that the lever cap has not changed, unless a B casting has been removed from this part here. And the iron is the same, but that mark down here is no longer there. The shape of the iron and everything else is the same, so that hasn't given us a big change at all. But when we look at the body, that's when we're going to see some changes. Let's take a look. The first thing is that all of these patent dates, these 2 patent dates were added, of March 25th, 02 and August 19th, 02. And the frog seat, which is the area that the frog would sit on, has totally changed. And the 2 curves. And now there are these bolsters here to take the set screws, and there's a rib that goes down the center. So that will change this and the frog as well that sits on it. We can still see that it is still a low knob here. There's no bead, as there shouldn't be, but something has changed in the front, and that is that now instead of it saying number NO4 here, it says, see if I can get some light in there for you, but it says Bailey in front of the knob, and here number, and then the 4 over in this corner. So that's changed. Bailey's name has been added to it. And the reason that those changes were made, that there were some lawsuits that had to be settled between Stanley and Bailey. Now you notice also that the side thickness of the cheek here is now thicker at the top than the other one, but it still is tapered, getting much thicker at the bottom for support. And that hopefully will prevent these from snapping across here, as they sometimes do. There's I'm not sure that there's anything else. I'd have to go back to the book and look and see. It won't be till the next change that I believe in Type 10 the handle will change. Okay, so on the frog, I noted that there would be a change, and there's this rib here to allow that, this groove here to allow that rib to come through for support. Circular disc is still the same, but up here now, the Stanley is here, and there's a patent date sideways, and the other one they had the patent dates going this way. So there's a change there. So all these little things as you go through there, you will find are the things that'll help you type or date the ones that you have. Also, you see this nut here is still the small one. They later got bigger. This is still the small one, but there's no longer any of that writing inside here mentioning Bailey's patent or anything. And now, when you push this forward, it releases, it's reversed now, and it will make the iron go forward, and it's clockwise now. Whereas on that other one, it was counterclockwise to make it go forward. So that's another little change. So a simple matter of setting it up, putting the 2 screws in, putting the 2 screws in here, dropping this in. Now this is nice because this adjustment is clockwise, so you know you're going forward with the iron when you reach around with these 2 fingers to do that. Fits nicely in the hand, and you can see it gave me a nice full shaving. Just sighting down, that edge to make sure that it was right and parallel to the sole of the plane, and not a very long setup. There you go. We'll try. Here we are with what I called a Type 16, and I should reference that this is probably what I would consider a 16A, because this one here, while the 16, if you look in the book, the 16 was made between 33 and 41. The next year in 42, they did something peculiar, and they started changing some features due to the war. And one of those features was that they took the brass knob and they encased it in plastic. Now, the strange thing about that I don't understand is that most people that talk about these things say that they did this to save the brass. But it seems to me that that they have brass in the inside in these wear portions here. So I don't know how much savings there was to encase a knob in that hard plastic or rubber. But there are some other changes about this plane that are pretty amazing, and some of these changes may have been before we got to this this Type 16A, partially 17 to 16, most likely war production, but it doesn't fit everything that is in the war production. The war production, you're supposed to have noticeably heavier castings on these sides, but these are not that way. These are still, they're beveled out, so they're wide, they're thick in here, and then they get thinner as they come up to this edge. They're tapered up. So that doesn't fit the war period. The war period is supposed to have heavier castings. The second thing is that in here, this piece would not normally be there, except in the 16, so it shows up in the Type 17. Now, the reason this isn't a Type 17 is that the handle is still rosewood, and for the war years, they stopped using the rosewood, and they changed that out, and that change, I believe, is listed noticeably heavier, dark rosewood stain. It's just a hardwood with a rosewood stain, but this is absolutely rosewood. So this is the 16, this is the 16 body. Now, since we've been looking at the things, one noticeable difference is that height again in the knob is much taller than the old ones. And the casting now has a raised portion here. You can see this line here and over here, that this part here has been made thicker, and now the number 4 is on the front here, and Bailey has been subjugated to this rear portion. So another change in the castings, and then in here, the patent dates are gone that were in here, and now it says Made in USA. So let me get this apart, and I'll show you the internal workings. Oh, here, before I do that, you can see that the lever cap has now Stanley's logo on it, and this shape is called a kidney shape. And it's meant to be able to prevent this from, when you tighten this down, that this doesn't slip out. I find the old ones don't really slip on me, so they're okay. And on the iron, you see there's the other new change, is this Stanley Made in USA, and it's in the keyed shape there in the square. So let's open it up and take a look. Kidney shape. On the back, patent number. These ribs are new or recent, maybe not to this type because we are jumping ahead, so we would have to follow each type through to see what the changes were chronologically. The iron, the logo. Now, this frog is totally different. All of these indentations in this shape still has the disc here, but this is different. So let me take these out and we'll take a look. So here's the frog seat, which is similar to the other one. This little portion here is a little wider, and this addition is now here, which is an adjustment for the frog, so you can move the frog forward and back without having to remove it or to loosen the two screws and adjust it. you can use this adjuster on the back. And that came a few types earlier, but it still persisted through this. So we can look at this and determine that it's probably a 16 and with parts that are 17. So the frog itself, we saw this side of it. Let's take a look at the back. And you can see there's that adjuster knob. Here's the piece that will fit onto what I just showed you for moving it forward and back. And on the lateral adjuster is Stanley with no patent marks. Right there. Because we have this piece back here, and I didn't change that screw, when I seated this frog back on, the screws were in perfect alignment and the front was correct for what I had set it. So I could remove the frog and put it back without it changing that distance in or out. Interesting that took a little while longer to set up and to adjust in or out. The frog is not exactly right, so you can see that I had to adjust my lateral adjuster off center. Normally, if it was straight and everything was in tune, that you could basically keep it straight like that. But I had to adjust it to the right to sight down there and to get it to be totally even. You can see it's a little heavy on this side. So to make it even, I had to go pretty far over. So I'll have to take this apart and I'll do a little adjustments. You can correct that. Not just by that lateral adjuster, but you can adjust it by realigning, checking your iron to make sure it's square and all of that. So we no longer need the Stanley guidebook because this plane, it will not be in it because this is the newest Stanley. And you can see the difference. Here we have them lined up in the front. Let me move that back just a hair. So there. And you can see how much longer it is. About a good 1.25 inches. Also, the Stanley 4, the older version, this came in at 3 pounds 4 ounces. The new version is 4 pounds 12 ounces. So that is substantially heavier than the older one. So let me take this older one out of here and give you the lowdown on the newer version. You could see that the contour of the cheek or side of it is totally different than the old one, but there are some other planes that had a similar longer portion in the front and then shorter in the back. So this isn't the first to do that, but it's sort of an awkward curve in here. This seems a little flat here, and then it curves down. So I think, frankly, this wasn't well thought out. But that's neither here nor there. Over here, you have the 4 in brass inserted, and there's a tiny little number, NO right in here, and then the 4. And I don't know that it's necessary, but it's also on the back here as well. You can also see that this is cherry, whereas the Stanleys were rosewood. But they also used some fruit wood that was stained to look like rosewood at different times. But all the early ones are rosewood. So now we're at cherry. And the other things that are different about this plane is the adjuster here. So whereas we used to have a brass knob down here that you would turn, and that would do the advancement, this is called a Norris style adjuster. And it's an interesting one. I'll open this up to show you it. But it's a little strange the way it works. But the other thing about this plane is that it has an adjustable throat. You see here, this insert? And to use the adjustable throat, all you do is you loosen this knob, and then you pivot this part here, and it moves that portion under here out and in. Now, I like it. That's flush here, but I prefer a tighter throat, so I've moved it down so there's less space between the iron and the front. And tighten this down a little bit, just snug it down, not too much, and that's enough to keep it from moving when you're planing. So that's an interesting feature. So let's remove the front of it. You see there's a knob here with a bolt that goes through that pivots this up, and it cantilevers against this, and that gives you the tension for the iron underneath. Still the Stanley Sweetheart logo, but this is now either aluminum or some pot metal. You can see, even though the plane is heavier, this is a very lightweight piece. And it works fine, apparently, but I think it's a little cheap. My own opinion. So I'm going to set that down for now, and we'll look at the iron itself. We'll take that out, and we'll set that aside for the moment. Now, here is the Norris style adjuster, and you can see, you have to loosen this down here, that it pivots as well as goes down through the center nub. Now, this piece goes into your iron, and that controls your iron. And if you want to pivot the iron laterally, you would just pivot this back and forth. The problem with a lot of the older ones of these is every time you would try to loosen or tighten, bring the iron back, move it forward, you might hit this and change your lateral adjustment. So what they've done is underneath they've supplied this tensioner. And so what that does is that once you set this to where you want it, you go down here and you can tighten that off, and that will no longer move, but you can still move the iron in and out through this adjustment, but it stays laterally the same. Now the frog is different. You can see here, there is no separate frog. This is integral to the sides and to the plane itself. There is no adjustment back here to move the frog forward and back. They've got the frog set where they think you need it to be, and that's what it is, and it's rigid. The nice thing about it is that it's still the same width of the older frogs, so you get good support on the frog. A lot of them just have these two little ribs behind in other brands, and it's not as substantial as this. So this is a good thing. So what we'll do is we'll put the iron back on. I have to loosen this down here to allow that to move freely. And we'll take a look at the iron. Let me put this down for a second. And here's the iron. And up here, it has the Stanley etched there very, very lightly. Probably laser etched Stanley there. A2 steel. 25 degrees is what they're suggesting is the bevel for the iron here. And then 12-141, I think, is the part for that iron. And here you see a little bit of a wear where that screw goes in to tighten against that and push that lever cap up. So the chip breaker is the newer style, which instead of having a bow in it this way and acting like a spring, it has a flat surface that mates with the surface of your iron, and you just keep pressure on it. And the problem is it's actually, if it's ground right, it's not a problem. But basically, the tighter you make it here, it wants to spring up, which could open a little bit of a gap here. But so far, that's not been a terrible issue. I'm not going to worry about that, but you can see how tight I've got this chip breaker to the end of the iron. Not a lot exposed. Now on the other side, as I started to sharpen this iron, I realized that there was sort of a hollow in the middle. Now what I did was I used a Sharpie to color in everything, and then as I sharpen it, I can see what parts I'm actually getting sharp. Now in this case, I've stopped here because I had a good line all the way across. But behind here is hollow behind that. So the next time I sharpen it, I'll have to take off more all the way here to maintain that line. And probably all of that black will disappear. But I didn't see any reason to go any further. It's nice and sharp. Here's the hole for that adjuster. So let's put it back into the plane. So what I want to do is carefully set it in so that it goes through that hole, and then search out this piece. Now you see how the Norris adjuster will work as a lateral adjuster. So we get it approximately to where we want, and then we close it off just gently. And now let's place this on it, and we'll tighten that slightly. Now, one of the things I don't like about this is that if I need to adjust this, and this is super tight, this will be very difficult to move it up and down. So you need to loosen this a little. But if you're taking your plane and you're sighting down it, the possibility of this falling out is a concern. So you have to keep it just gently snug because you don't want it to come out of there while you're doing that. So I'm going to use this to pull that iron back out, and I'll sight down it again, and I can see that it's quite a bit out, which is way too much. I was playing with it when it was off of there. So we'll keep moving this back until we feel like we're close to what we want as far as depth. And now, sighting down there, I can see that I want to adjust that lateral. So I'm going to make sure the lateral is a little loose, go back over, and it's awkward. It's kind of hard to hold on to everything at one time, but we'll that's the wrong way. So there we go. And, but it gave me a nice shaving after I fiddled with a little bit, but not very long, so not too bad. And it gave me a nice complete shaving. I'm putting some marks on this board just so we can see how it planes. I find that to be helpful to see what's being cut and what's not. And we're going to start with the 1891, the Type 6A. And I've gone through and tightened up things and done a little bit of honing. But we'll see how it works. It gives a nice shaving. Took all of this off, but it didn't take this off, and that was my bad start, I think. It might be that part of the board may have been a little low, because you can see there's still a little pencil mark there. But that's a terrific shaving. And like I say, this is a 1890, so we're talking about a 130-year-old plane. And the finish that it gives is very, very nice and smooth. And we'll pick up the Type 9, which is 1902 to 1907, and we'll put it through its paces on the same board. There's no change at all. And we'll see how it does. And that is now giving us a nicer shaving. The surface is very smooth, similar to the last one. So we had a jump in basically 10 years between the last one and this one. And they both work very well, nice and tight. 1933. So our difference here now from 1902, 1907 to 1933 to 41, that is a 36-year difference. Now there's some major changes in here, and we have the higher knob that we're going to be dealing with. So maybe a little difference in the way we hold it. But I'll go ahead and sight down this now and see how I am. I'm a little heavy on one side. This adjustment knob, a lot of people worry about the amount of slack there is in it and how many revolutions you have to get to going tight. But what I do is whenever I'm setting the iron, I set the iron so it's a slight cut, maybe even no cut at all. And then I always turn the dial, the knob here, forward till it just stops. Now I'm ready to advance it. Now it's already forward. So as I go through here, all I have to do in order to advance it, that's taking wispy shaving, is simply reach down with these two fingers and just give it a nudge. And not a lot, because if you do too much, you wind up with a much heavier shaving than you want. Here we go. Now we're getting nice shavings.
And see, all I have to do is just very quickly come down here and nudge that forward. I had to advance it a little further, but now that's not a bad shaving. Newer one. Now I bought this used, and it just arrived a couple of weeks ago. As a matter of fact, I did a little short video about its arrival because it was packed in a Quaker Oats box, so I thought that was kind of funny. This plane, you have to continually push down this way because the angle of this handle is upright. So if I'm pushing forward, I'm not getting a lot of pressure down. I have to apply quite a bit of pressure on the forward part in order to do that. And I don't like that. I would say that the worst part of the changes that they did was in changing that angle of this handle. And I've said that on some of the other ones that I've compared and found that issue. It's a more awkward plane to use than those others. A bit more adjusting, and I'm getting a better shaving. But I have to say, I've spent too much time, as far as I'm concerned, on tweaking this plane back and forth to get it to give me a nice full shaving. The adjustable throat is nice, the handle is not. I do not like the angle of push is always perpendicular to this angle. So this angle, perpendicular to that, that's the way you're pushing it, which is more forward than down. So you have to always use your hand to do this downward pressure as you're planing. So you're pushing down in the front, and I'm not pushing forward as much as I'm pushing back here. Right here I feel a lot of pressure pushing down, trying to keep this plane down to the board. I'm not loving it. So there you have it. 4 planes. 19th century, 20th century, 21st century. 21st century, a lot of what you would call, quote, improvements on the plane. But frankly, it wasn't fun to use. It was uncomfortable. It took way too long to adjust it. Probably 10 times as long as those other ones. Yes, it's heavier. That's nice. But that didn't compensate for the ideal handle on those that has been changed to a more upright, and you don't get the feel that you get with those planes. So if I were you, I think I'd pass on this one, although it wasn't very expensive, and I'd go with one of the older planes. Hey, thanks for coming, and thanks for if you stayed through this video. It's like 40 minutes. Forget about my 20-minute thing that I wanted to do in the beginning. But if you stayed, I appreciate it. I hope you'll share it, and I hope you'll like it. Let me know what you think. My recommendation is still to go with the older Stanleys. Till we see each other again, take care. And here's the plane that I got. It's a Stanley No. 4.